Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Chat live on Instagram. I'm so glad to meet you. I'm Teresa Wiedrich, the certified life coach and homeschool mentor here on the Homeschool Mama Self-Care account. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Michelle Brownell from Homeschool Essentials. If you haven't already met Michelle, I wonder why I haven't, because we do so many common things. It is remarkable to me that we haven't already connected. She's a home educator, parent coach, consultant, and speaker, supporting parents for more than 15 years in the learning, social, and emotional areas of development. She's the founder of Homeschool Essentials, an online support community for parents home educating their children, bringing in the latest info on parenting education and mental health. Sound familiar? This is most definitely someone that I need to meet to join me around the water cooler and have a conversation. So it's such a delight to have you here, Michelle.
Well, hello there. Yay.
So nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too. I'm so excited. We finally get to connect.
Absolutely. And it is amazing when you're sharing what you're sharing that this is what I've been doing. If you're following, what I've been doing as well. So, and then I was noticing your essential values in how you're approaching your homeschool and in also how you're approaching your work with other homeschool families. And I'm like, that's familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about you, your homeschool journey, and also the work that you do in the homeschool community.
Sure. Well, my husband and I have been married. It will almost be 29 years. We have two kiddos that we adopted we adopted them at birth. So they are now 18 and 15. And we were one of those crazy couples that talked about homeschooling before we even got married. Like we were talking while we were dating. And, it was just one of those things that we really wanted to provide an education that was tailor-made for our kids and unique to their strengths and their interest and their unique abilities. We had no idea when we got started that both of our kids would grow up to have learning challenges and differences, and we'd have to learn all the nuances of that. And homeschooling just became the perfect fit environment to be able to help them through that and help them thrive in.
Yeah, it really is. It's beautiful. I don't know if I've shared this with you before that I have 4 kids.
Okay.
And yeah, the oldest is almost 23 and our youngest, so actually I have 3 kids all grown up and I've only got my 15-year-old at home now. And when did that happen? It
Yeah.
feels it was a very long process. There was a lot going on, obviously, over the course of time. And then all of a sudden it was boom, it's done.
Yeah.
That's how it.
And isn't it
Yeah,
interesting that each child seems to have a different parent and a different homeschool experience? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, the first one probably the most task mastery in my experience.
Yeah, because we
Yeah,
change and we grow, and each child is different, and so we learn how to bend to their needs and what they're doing, and it helps us bend. And yeah, it's a growing experience both for our kids and for us, and that's what I love, to come alongside parents as you do and help us understand that, that we're learning right along with them. We've never had one of these kids before at this age and with what they're doing, so we get to learn with them. It's neat.
I think there's a lot of people that talk about how it's more challenging because, like, when I talk about individualizing or customizing in education, it's more challenging. But actually, I think it's easier when you lean into how things actually work for the child, how they actually learn, what they want to learn about. When you're leaning into child-led learning, this is the word that I do, then I see it's actually a simpler process, whereas trying to make everybody sit at the table and do the thing that you've determined is the best thing, which is classical to the firstborn, experience. The first child gets that the most, in my experience, and it's actually easier than doing that approach, the more task-mastered approach.
Yeah, it definitely takes a mindset shift, and I can see where the ease for a lot of parents comes because there's a security in that.
Yes.
There's a list already made. There's an assurance of what they're going to learn and that they're going to hit all the benchmarks according to someone else's standard. So that is where the ease comes from, I think, in parents. Where the challenge comes that I've seen with my own kids and several families is a lot of times if our kids don't learn that way, then the challenge is butting heads with the child and facing resistance with the child. But it takes a lot of mental space and emotional space for us as parents to shift from that task oriented or that classical education if it's not a fit for our kids. For some kids it is, and they can thrive in that, but for some it's not. But it takes a lot of curiosity and creativity for us to be able to do that. And a lot of parents, we're just busy. We're stressed. And so having a list is easier than taking the time to really sit and observe and understand how our kids are. But when we can yield to that, when we have the capacity to do that, the relationship between the parent and the child gets easier, and then the learning gets easier for the child. And that's the shift. Yeah.
I don't know, amenable learning environment for the kids. What I've noticed, actually, I just was speaking in my Facebook group with one homeschool mom who was saying, but I want, my goal is this, X, and I'm not able to make that happen, but I know that that's the best thing. And just like what you're sharing, that rendering of what you believe to be the best thing, it's just stretching. It isn't. I don't know how you went into homeschooling, but I went in with a classical homeschool. I went into homeschooling with a private school actually at home, and I outdo the private school my kids were already in. And it worked, like, I should say, I observed it worked all right for my second, but it didn't work for my first. But now, fast forward a couple decades, I hear that it wasn't exactly working the way I thought it was, even for my second. She was just going with it. Yeah.
Well, and that's the challenge too. Some of our kids are compliant children.
Exactly.
And so they'll work with it even though it's not their preferred way. And just because you have a compliant child doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing for that child either. So that's where you get to learn and observe and listen to the cues and the stress response that they're having and the emotions that they're having. Because and I was in some ways fortunate enough to have a child that wasn't compliant. He was right out of the bat saying, nope, not doing that. Nope, that's not for me. And it was hard. So it's not that it was easy, but in retrospect, realizing that forced me to really think outside the box. Whereas if I had a compliant child, it would, because I'm task oriented, I'm as type A as they get. So I want to have all my ducks in a row and have it all. But, he's hanging upside down from the chair and spinning around and wanted to shoot arrows rather than, write anything in any form. So he really stretched me. And it's because of him. Really, and he tells me this all the time. He's like, Mom, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if it wasn't for me. I'm like, you're right. Because I've learned so much from him and I'm so grateful for it because it's helped me understand even my own stress response of things and my own nuance of being able to stay in a better state of mind to learn. So it's been huge. We learn from our kids, we really do.
Yeah, I think if I could say anything to a homeschool mom, I would just say that yes, it is an educational journey and choice for your family. But when you're signing up to be a parent, I didn't know this, but you are not just signing up to do something for them or, to be something for them. You are actually signing up to grow. And you're signing up to grow just like they are. They just don't know it either when they enter the world. But we both are at the same time, differently, and we just have to yield to whatever is calling us to grow right here.
Yeah. I often say, there's children are a gift. We hear that a lot. But when we pause and we look at, okay, well, what gift are our children giving to us? And when I took time to reflect that with my own kids, I saw two words bubbled up for me: the gift of joy and rest, and the gift of transformation.
Yeah.
Because kids are on their own timeline and they're discovering things in their own unique way. And a lot of times that's what causes us to pause and slow down and have the rest if we can come alongside them and learn with them in their curiosity and in their discoveries. And that sometimes goes against what we want to do because we have all this other agenda and things that we have to get done. So leaning into that rest. Yeah. And then the transformation, comes when things don't work out the way that we thought they would work out. And we're really learning from our kids and observing how they're wired and being able to transform what we thought education was going to look like, what we thought parenting was going to look like, even what we thought this child was going to look like. So I've learned parent the child that's in front of me, home educate the child that's in front of me, not the child I thought they would be. And that changes everything.
Almost word for word what I say, the child in front of you, not the method, Don't choose the method. Don't make the routine happen. It's not about the curriculum. It's not about all those things. It's about the specific child, which
For
makes
sure.
it, and not to say it's like magically easier, because you don't really know fully who that child is. That child is always growing and evolving, and they don't know fully who they are. They're in a growth process too, but it's like almost like creating space and allowing for space for them to become them instead of trying to make something happen, which is funny because the culture, I mean, the way I see it, that is what the institutional approach is we don't have time to figure you out. Just do the thing we want to do. And this is the intention, the good intention we have for your education. So just do the thing. And whereas in the homeschool, we can focus on the child in front of us, but we don't trend that way initially, or at least some of us don't. I know there are some that do, but that we don't trend that way. But it is the child in front of you, and only that child, that we really need to be focused on.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges of why, and I'm speaking from my own life and what I went through too, one of the reasons why so many of us don't start that way or don't lean that way is because we are
Yep.
busy. We're under our own stress, and some of us have gone through things that are traumatic.
Yep.
And, you know, if you've gone through grief, if you've gone through loss, you've gone through even adding a new child to your family or a move or a job loss, any of these things that add stress onto our life puts us in a heightened state of awareness that doesn't allow us to operate out of curiosity, out of calm, out of, you know, compassion even for our child when they're having a hard time. And I think when we're under that, I think understanding when we're not operating out of that is really a clue for us to say, what is the stress that's happening in my own life, and how can I get back to a place of, you know, I call it that emotional regulated
Yep.
state where I can operate out of an expanded way of thinking, out of that curiosity. Because we're living in a heightened world. Like, there are things coming at us all over the place, and lots of us have multiple kids, or we're working while we're homeschooling. And so the stress is a huge thing, not just for our children, but for us as parents. And when we can learn to recognize those stress triggers, we can start to peel back and remove them and be able to bring in space and capacity to have those other awarenesses to lean into our kids. Yeah. But it's hard.
It is a big growth journey, and that self-awareness aspect that you speak to, I had no idea that that's what I was signing up as a parent to focus on my own growth journey. That's not what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I thought I was like trying to participate in the creation of a product. And it's not that I words, but I think that the parenting world, the parenting books out there very much suggest if you put A, B, and C into this child, the formula, then you're going to get a certain child out. And life doesn't work like that. Does not work like that. And so it was a big growth journey. And that self-awareness is the biggest first step, really. You know, in the last few weeks, and this is one that you didn't mention as a stressor that not everybody is experiencing, but is for me a perimenopausal, like, whoa, what is this?
I'm right there with you. Yes.
Like, come
Yeah.
on, like,
Yeah.
we did all the PMS. Can it just stop? Just no, just like all or none would be preferable for me, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's been a lot. And I have had to repeatedly ask myself, okay, so this feeling or the feelings that I'm having, is it true? Like, are these feelings that I'm having, am I translating them into some story that is bigger than it is? And I can, if I allow myself to lean into the feelings that I'm feeling, or I can ask myself, what's true in this? And the true is these emotions and these hormonal dumps and all these ebbs and flows mean that I have to, I don't want to say not trust. I need to feel my feelings, but I need to expect also that they don't necessarily tell me the story of my life or tell me the story of the day. And by the mere act of just being self-aware and noticing them and acknowledging them, it's somehow, as my husband said, which is funny because he actually did comment on this specific thing, it's about half the
Yep.
battle. And I'm like, yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
totally is. And, you know, I was one of those fortunate people that suffered from PMDD, in my early years, and a lot of people don't talk about that, but it's the extreme form of PMS where it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, and it's very, very real. And you can tangibly notice during your cycles when, I call it the pressure cooker, when the pressure cooker is released and you feel normal again, and when it's not. And I had to learn in that season to ebb and flow with that, even in my homeschool, because I didn't want my kids to experience monster mom. That's what my son called me when I would get into that state, just for the sake of getting education done. So I had to learn to kind of relax in those seasons and say, okay, today our learning is going to look a little bit different, because I would rather have a calm, connected state with my kids than have a stressed, pressured, frantic state. And they're not going to learn anyway. Like, our brains aren't wired, for success. They're wired for safety and connection. And so if things are offline and there's stress involved, our kids aren't going to learn. So the more we can keep it calm. But I want to cycle back to what you said, no pun intended with that word, but about the thoughts and the feelings, because it's so true. Like, having gone through years of counseling and therapy and stuff, you recognize that thoughts create emotions and our emotions create actions. And so I had my counselor, I love this analogy, when he talked about our emotions and our thoughts, he described it like a school bus, which I thought was funny, that we're the bus driver, and our thoughts and our emotions can pop on and off the bus all day long. And just because they're there doesn't mean they're necessarily ours or they're necessarily there to stay. But we can be aware that, oh no, this thought came up on the bus. Is this a thought that's serving me? Is this a thought that's true? Is this a thought that needs my attention because there's something going on? And some of them do. Some of them are valid and we need to do that. But if it's a thought that's just pulling me down a negative, I call it that spiral, that toxic vortex of our spiral thinking, then I can kick that thought out of my head. I can say, I appreciate that you popped up. I don't need that right now. This is what's going on. But being aware that those thoughts, that if they're not the thoughts that are true, and we hold on to them and we ruminate over them, that's what causes that spiral toxic thinking that puts us into a state of despair, as opposed to, I call it my anti-vortex. When a thought comes in that is either rooted in trauma or rooted in an old mindset or something like that, I can acknowledge it, I can be aware of it, and I can say, okay, what is it that I need to shift this thought so that I can be fully present? If it's a thought that's truly impacting something, how do I need to process it?
Yeah.
Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to journal it? Do I need to sit and cry? We went through a season last January, a very traumatic grief period that we were going through. And I learned from past experiences of not processing it very well to now present. I gave myself scheduled time every morning that I would sit with my emotions and feel them to the core of how I could feel them, and cry and journal and just let them be. And then when they were done, I got up, I took my shower, I made my coffee, and I was able to be fully present for my kids. But if I didn't give those emotions attention, they would have come out in other interactions with my kids, because emotions are energy and they need to be discharged. So if they're there, do we want to discharge them in an unhealthy way, or do we want to discharge them in a healthy way? And that's been a huge learning process for me. And it feels weird to say, I scheduled time to grieve, but I did, because life was so busy and my kids needed me and they needed my attention, and I needed to teach, and I needed to be present for other things, that I gave myself time to do that so that I could be fully present throughout the day in a healthier way.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Michelle. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
But we all do. We all go through rough seasons, and a lot of it's not, especially here on Instagram, it's not acknowledged, because we all know, we all see our highlight reels and stuff, but behind every post, behind every story, there's other things going on. And and it impacts our homeschool, and it impacts our relationship with our kids. The more we can be real and authentic with ourselves and get that healing, the more we can show up for our kids. And in our community, and what I talk about a lot, and what you're doing too, is we need people to show up for us so that we can show up for our kids, because everybody needs somebody in their corner to show up for them. And I love that that's what you're doing, because we're not meant to be isolated alone. And so many of us do suffer in silence because there's nobody there that, we feel safe and comfortable to be able to share the most vulnerable with. But vulnerability brings connection,
It does.
Yeah.
It, and to I don't know, the moment that I started writing, like my blog writing, was very early into my homeschool years. And I was petrified that people were going to read it. And I believed that, I don't know why, but it was always my instinct to write. And then I started this blog, and then I realized that most people weren't actually reading it, and that most people didn't know that I was writing it. But as time went by, I grew to own my voice and then do this whole online thing, a whole different level of owning your voice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you know what? When I do that, here's what I've learned is that I spend a lot of time in my closet, literally, Studio C when I'm podcasting, and I'm sharing from what's true and the things that I've learned, like the things you just shared about the mindset. That was huge for me, and the entire reason I went into this direction is Dr. Daniel Amen's discussion about your thoughts and your feelings. And so then I go into my closet, I share what's true, and then I discover that other people resonate with what I'm saying. And I'm sure there's some things that they don't resonate with, or some random people that totally don't agree. That's cool. That's fine. We all get to have our approaches or thoughts about life. But when I'm being honest and vulnerable, then people connect. And that is a powerful way to build community, is to come from an authentic space where people connect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I heard a quote a long time ago, we lead with our strengths, but we connect on our
Yeah.
weaknesses. So you being able to put a podcast out and to write, that's an area and a gift of strength for you. And you're putting your voice out there. And yet being able to be vulnerable with the things that we struggle with are what help us connect to one another. Because none of us have it all figured out. You know, we're learning from each other, and we grow in community, and we grow in shared stories. And, you know, I have a little Post-it note on my desk. It's actually a magnet that a friend gave me, and it says, speak even if your voice shakes. Because when we want to share our story, sometimes it feels so vulnerable that it's scary to put ourselves out there. But the world needs to hear our story. It needs to hear your voice. We all need encouragement. You know, anytime we speak, I always say, we're not really sharing anything that's new because it's out there everywhere. But what we are sharing is truth, and we all need to be reminded of truth. And we never know when the person that's listening to us needs it in that moment that we're saying it or that we're hearing it. Because we can hear something a year ago and hear the same thing now and be in a completely different season of life, and it's exactly what we needed to hear.
Yeah, that's true. It's a delight to share the space with you. It feels very similar, very aligned values, and it feels like we're doing the same thing, nurturing the nurturers. So it's been a pleasure. Definitely have to do this again. Maybe we should high school at some point.
Okay.
Something that is discussed on Instagram enough is the high school experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons for that, and I've struggled with it with my own life, it becomes our kids' stories at some point, you know, because they're launching into adulthood. So there's things that I always ask my kids permission. Can I share this with people? Because it's their story. And I think that's what a lot of us who are raising high schoolers and young adults, it's not that we don't want to share with other people. It's our kids' stories to share. We need their permission to be able to do it. But I can share from my own perspective of what I've learned and grown, and that's my story. And at some point, our kids are going to grow up and share their stories. But yeah, I would love to talk with you because that's a whole nother, you know, I was like this when I was about high school. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And now I'm loving the teenage years, like because of all the hard work we did early on in our relationship more than anything. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Yeah, such a delight to chat with you, Michelle.
Thank
And
you.
everybody, this actually will be a live recorded event every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm joining with other people around the water cooler. I will no longer call it a Homeschool Mom coffee chat because I am never drinking coffee at this time of day.
That's funny.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's such a pleasure to chat with you. And if anybody wants to watch the video later, it'll also be on my YouTube channel. So thank you for joining me.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to connect again.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Okay, everybody.